the majority of the people that I work with have a business of some sort or a creation or something that they have created and are sharing with the world. And what I mean by soul-aligned entrepreneur is these people that are coming into my one-on-one coaching practice, they want to connect with their soul, their intuition, their purpose, with spirit, and they want to take that connection and they want to weave it into their business and their creations. It's very purpose-driven.
Your journey to the divine is an intimate exploration of self, where you are both the seeker and the source of enlightenment. I, Jessica Paschke, invite you to break free from the ordinary, to reforge your spiritual path with courage, curiosity, and audacity. Unleash the power of your spiritual connection, stepping into a purpose-driven life free of have-tos and shoulds. Join me on this profound exploration of rediscovery, where you'll not only redefine your own spiritual practice, but also inspire a collective awakening. Welcome to Reclaiming Our Spirit.
Hello, and welcome back to season 2. So excited of Reclaiming Our Spirit. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you were just joining us in season 2, I am Jessica Paschke, and I am a certified equity-centered transformation coach who helps people connect with their self, their soul, and their spirit to co-create lives and businesses that feel unshakable. And we have a whole new season that I cannot wait to dive in and fill you in on what that looks like. But first, our moment of joy. Now, if you're not familiar, every episode we do a moment of joy. And why, you might wonder, why do we do a moment of joy? Well, joy is one of those complicated things. It sometimes flows really easily and we can access it, no big deal. And then sometimes joy is just really hard. And people talk, I think, a lot about this idea of spontaneous joy that just sort of happens like, ooh, and then I had joy. But the conversation doesn't really continue on to talk about those times when joy isn't present and we have to create it. We have to pursue it, not just in those big grand ways that we think of when we think of joy, but also in small ways as well. And so this week, I wanted to talk about one of the ways that I created joy in a small way. And this summer was my garden. I love to garden. I have talked about it before. There is something about putting my hands in the dirt and talking to the plants and watching them grow. It gets me really excited. I'm going to be honest. I like my gardens wild. I like them when they're just like a little bit like something out of a fairy tale. So I really like splashes of color. You're not going to see like a properly pruned something. I like things a little bit wild. And I decided that I was going to garden this summer, and I almost didn't do it because we were moving and I was unsure that I would be around to see anything come to fruition for the garden. I was like, should I really invest this time? Because I'm going to be leaving, at the end of July. Do I really want to put in the time and effort and maybe not be around to see the fruition of everything? And I thought, you know what? Screw it. I am planting a garden because every summer we have a garden and it brings me joy. So I planted some beans and some kale and some strawberries and tomatoes, and just to see what could happen, what could pop up. And it just brings me joy. The whole process brings me joy. Honestly, there's nothing like a berry that's warm in the sun or popping a tomato in your mouth right from the garden. And like with all that juice, it's like the essence of all that is good in the world. When that strawberry bursts or that tomato bursts in your mouth. It's amazing. And so my moment of joy is from all the beans and the kale and the tomatoes and the strawberries that I got to experience. And now I also get to leave a little bit of joy for someone else, those little nuggets of joy that will show up for them while they're here for the next owners of the house. So I'm very excited about that as well. Joy for all. So that is my moment of joy, gardening. So let's dive in. Let's just have a conversation about what's going to be happening in season 2. Like, what can you expect? So last season, we explored a lot of different ideas, but the central theme was reclaiming our purpose, reclaiming our intuition and connection, reclaiming our story, our blueprint, our spiritual practice. Definitely kind of diving into those essential topics, those big pondering things that we like to think about. And to be honest, I love to talk about it. I love chatting about different spiritual topics, evolution, all of that stuff. I could talk about it for days and hours at a time. And so many of you tuning in are very familiar with that side, that aspect, that branch of my work, because you've met me through those courses, those workshops, those sessions where we cover things like intuitive development and tarot and spirit guides and mediumship and angels. And I love helping people connect in those ways. It lights me up. It lights them up to create that direct line to spirit. There's just something about it. And, which is my favorite word, as you know, and what you might not know is that I also work in depth with soul-aligned entrepreneurs, practitioners, coaches, business owners, healers, readers, creatives, artists, a lot in my one-on-one work, in my one-on-one coaching practice. In fact, the majority of the people that I work with have a business of some sort or a creation or something that they have created and are sharing with the world. And what I mean by soul-aligned entrepreneur is these people that are coming into my one-on-one coaching practice, they want to connect with their soul, their intuition, their purpose, with spirit, and they want to take that connection and they want to weave it into their business and their creations. It's very purpose-driven. We chatted about purpose last season, so you may want to hop on back to season 1 and take a listen to that episode. Okay, there were actually 2 on it. Bethany came on for the guest episode of purpose. It was a great conversation. But this idea with purpose is there's this golden thread that kind of flows through everything that we do in both life and work. And it's unique to each one of us. And soul-aligned or purpose-driven folks, they want to reclaim that thread in their work, and they want to combine it with what they value and what they know to be true from their life experiences, from where they've healed, from the impact that they want to make in the world. They want to share that. So it's a very different approach to business than some people take, because they're really weaving their story and their life experience into what they're doing. And it makes business a lot more personal than it maybe typically is out there in traditional business line models. And this work with soul-aligned entrepreneurs and practitioners really started to whisper quite a few years ago, but it really took on a momentum of its own. I really saw that shift from people coming in and asking me about relationships and life to career and work and creating their own businesses in 2020. That's really when it took off. I was noticing more and more entrepreneurs were showing up in my sessions, wanting to have that connection, wanting to have that passion about their work, really wanting to weave in what they've experienced, but it really took off in 2020. And at the time I thought, well, isn't this interesting? And I'm sure that some of it was connected to being locked up in our homes. Lots of time for self-reflection or lots of time for daydreaming about how you wish you were anywhere else but where you were in that moment. Okay. It was bringing a lot of things to the forefront. Whether you had a business or not, we were really looking for a change. We knew that we couldn't move forward from this place doing things like we always did, that something had to happen, something had to evolve. And one of my strengths in all the work that I do is noticing patterns and connections and seeing the bigger picture. I call it the 30,000 foot view. I'm able to really get up there and look at this idea of the 30,000 foot view and see the bigger picture. And people coming in, like I said, to the sessions in 2020 and even beyond that, were truly looking for connection. They were wanting more connection, real deep connection, not surface level, to their identity, to understanding who they were and how they were moving through the world, to trying to figure out who they were as a soul and what all of that meant, all those different moving parts, to connecting with their spirit guides or their angels or their team, however they wanted to describe it, and connecting more deeply to the world around them, which makes sense. A lot of times when things are taken away from us, like connection to the world around us, we realize how much we crave it and what an important part it played in our lives. So connection was really huge. They were wanting more connection. People were also really wanting more authenticity, authentic ways to do things and move through the world. And they wanted that authenticity with integrity in their work and in their life. That was like non-negotiable. And they were also wanting to get in alignment with something bigger than themselves, whether you call it the universe or spirit or source. But they were really craving, like I said, tapping into their purpose and creating a life and a business from that purpose-led place. They were no longer satisfied with work that just paid the bills. They wanted something that resonated more deeply and made a bigger impact in the world. It was almost like they were having this bigger calling, or the calling maybe was always there, but everything slowed down so much that they could no longer deny that there was a calling. And a lot of these soul-aligned entrepreneurs wanted to help people be the best version of themselves. There was definitely this aspect of helping, and just the act of helping someone else lit them up. They wanted to help other people have their needs met, have their dream life come to fruition, and really make a difference in the world, really make a difference in their own personal lives for the people that were around them, friends, family, all of that. They just were craving greater fulfillment in everything that they were doing. And they realized that in order to step into that place, they needed to sort of reimagine how they were doing things and reimagine how they were showing up in the world. So fascinating to me that this all sort of shifted, this new way of approaching things. People have always wanted to do things from a soul aligned place, but I'm just telling you, for me in my practice and listening to other people and other peers who were doing readings and sessions at that time, there was this wave, these realizations and these epiphanies that were coming up across the board for a lot of people. And any time that we have these epiphanies, or we have a new way of looking at things, a new way of thinking, a new way of creating, things are going to come up that you didn't expect because you've never encountered them before. You were moving along in life. You thought you knew what there was to know for the most part. Like, oh yeah, I healed that. No, we're good. I've looked at that. And then you start to do things in a different way. And all of a sudden, new thoughts are coming in, new challenges are coming in, new positive things are coming in. But like a lot of things get kicked up. It's sort of like kicking the sand up on the bottom of a lake or an ocean. And so what was happening is, as 2020 moved through and all the changes that happened with COVID and with the political climate and with world events in 2020, that was a big year, y'all. I mean, I still need a nap from that year. With all of this happening, it was kicking up a lot of that sand on the bottom of the ocean. And people were discovering that they were really done with this idea of the conventional business model. And they discovered it was possible to not have to follow the conventional business model, because now we're all in our houses not following the conventional business model. Okay. A lot of these soul-aligned entrepreneurs I was working with, they weren't throwing out their traditional business knowledge out the door. They weren't doing that. They were building on it. They were taking it further. They were just starting to see, though, that like if they just stayed with the traditional business knowledge, that there were some limitations to that and some pitfalls that were coming up. And it was clashing with their more purpose-driven, values-based approach. They needed more than what that model could offer them. They were also realizing that this idea that work-life balance, that intention of work-life balance that you hear people talk about all the time, it wasn't enough. These solo entrepreneurs were realizing that while balance and boundaries and not working too much and spending time with people you love, they were important, they also needed more than that. They were craving this evolution on a spiritual and a personal level, and this evolution on a business level. And all three of these things had to be present for them to accomplish the dreams that they were having, the kind of impact they were wanting to make, the kind of success or income they knew they were ready for. All of that needed to happen at the same time. So it wasn't just as easy as creating a business or just working on your spiritual self or just working on your personal human self. In order to really have it come, those things had to come together and combine in order to get where they were wanting to go. That's a lot more work. A lot more things to juggle, but it was leading him into places that were really fulfilling, really satisfying. If 2020 taught us anything, managing stress and emotional well-being is not an optional thing. Okay. We really learned the importance of self-care, of emotional health, of paying attention, having that awareness. And it was something that we needed a lot of in 2020. And it came to the forefront, especially for entrepreneurs and business owners. They were really looking for practical techniques to manage stress, to manage the change, the unknown. Everything was up in the air. Things like mindfulness, meditation, journaling. Some of them had done it before, but maybe had not applied it to their business. Some were just learning it for the first time, but they knew that something more was needed in order to get where they wanted to go. And they were bumping up against things that maybe they hadn't bumped up against before, or they hadn't bumped up against in a while. So things like self-doubt and limiting beliefs, old stories were coming to the surface. We talked a lot about that in season 1 in a couple episodes, like the power of a story, the power of knowing your story, what you need to work on, what you need to see. They were also wanting to really know. A lot of people came in and used the word sabotage. I feel like I'm sabotaging myself. I feel like I'm being held back, but I can't see what it is. I can't figure out how to get over this obstacle, this block, this whatever. What do I need to do to continue forward? That came up a lot. And they were noticing that they were feeling burnt out and overwhelmed, kind of resenting all this change that was happening to them. They just had too much on their plate. And they were finding that they weren't in love with what they had created, whether it was a business per se or a project they were working on, a creation they were working on, if they were artists, if they were at work and having a career, had a leadership role at work. They weren't in love with what they were doing. And they didn't love how they were doing it. And they didn't love how it made them feel while they were doing it. And I think that this kind of all sums it up, this craving for connection, this having to do things differently, this seeing the possibility. It makes me think a lot of the Hanged Man in tarot. Anytime things get turned upside down, our perspective will inevitably change. It's just a given. When things get turned upside down, that's the one thing you can rely on, is that you will see things that you never saw before in a way that you never saw it before, whether you want to or not. And with that perspective shift, a lot of people were wanting just more, more support, more clarity. You know, they were really seeing the importance of creating something in their lives, whether it's whatever they were creating, but creating things in their lives that could stand up in the eye of any storm that came their way. They wanted something that felt unshakable. They wanted to have the clarity and the direction and the trust and the confidence to navigate whatever it was that was going to come at them, because they had gotten turned upside down like the Hanged Man in tarot, and they couldn't unsee it. They couldn't unsee it. And they didn't want to unsee it. They didn't want to. These soul-aligned entrepreneurs didn't want to unsee it. And what kind of grew from this, which I think is really cool, is that so many of my clients decided that what they were doing, whether it was in life or business, it had to matter in the short term and the long term, because life was too short to waste it on anything else. It was too short. And it was this pursuit of finding meaning, of self-discovery, of spiritual evolution, of that Hanged Man energy that brought them to my door, that brought them asking the big questions. A lot of people said, oh, just give it time. It's going to go away. All of this focus on change, this new way of doing things, this desire that life should have more meaning, that we should find more meaning in what we're doing, more intentionality, it will go away. But not only did it not go away after we were released back into the wild, okay, that desire for those soul-aligned entrepreneurs grew. The desire for a life well lived, the desire for a life that made a difference in the world, for a life that was fulfilling and brought joy to themselves and to others, a life where they could tap into their voice and speak their personal truth with love and compassion. They wanted more. They had seen it, they had glimpsed it, and now they wanted to make it a reality. And I love that. I was just having a conversation with someone about this idea of, it was probably Melissa Amos, because we're teaching a luminary class where we're helping soul-aligned entrepreneurs create signature offers that light them up and light the world up. And we were chatting about this idea that when you start business, you go in thinking, I'm going to create something, I'm going to help people, it's amazing. You never realize how much you're going to learn about yourself, whether you want to or not. You are going to learn all the things. You're going to learn what triggers you. You're going to learn what isn't healed. You're going to learn how people move through the world, how to deal with conflict. All of these things are going to come up to be seen. It's like, wow, if you want to grow spiritually and personally and get to know yourself better, start your own business. You will know more about yourself than you ever wanted to know. And that can sound overwhelming, but I think it's also this amazing gift of really showing up and making the most of this beautiful life that we have chosen to live in this moment, in this place we call Earth, and doing more with what we have and really recognizing the power that's within us, because that's what was happening. That's what was happening and has been happening and is in full on happening out there in the world. People are realizing that this whole idea of them being just a drop in the ocean was bullshit. They're realizing that they have the power to ripple out massive change and impact. And they're no longer satisfied with just standing on the sidelines and watching others do what they could do. And often those other people aren't even doing it well. And they're like, oh my word, just move over here. Let me in. Let me share my magic. Let me share my voice. Let me share my story. Let me help you. I've been where you're at. They wanted to ripple out impact, and they continue to want to ripple out impact. And that's where I want to take season 2. I want to dive into these conversations about creating things, creating work, creating businesses, creating projects from this soul-aligned, purpose-driven perspective. And I'll be inviting guests into chat about purpose and abundance and tapping in and rooting into your unique gifts and all of this through specifically the lens of business, because we learn so much about ourselves in that, so much about ourselves, and through the lens of creating an impact in the world, rippling that out, really making a difference, really stepping into your purpose, speaking your truth, and helping other people. And that is our conversation for season 2. And it's going to be a good one. I cannot wait to share it with you. I'm very excited. Tune in. Our very next episode is going to have the amazing Jaya Rose.
The one thing that every single person who has gotten really good success from my teachings and from working with me, the one thing they do is be visible.
Cannot wait. She's such a brilliant light. You're going to love her. And while you wait, follow me on socials or my newsletter to be the first to know when that episode drops. And I'm going to be offering some fun things this season outside of the podcast. So you're going to want to know when those things happen as well. And the newsletter is the place to be. The newsletter people always know everything first. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter and follow me on socials to stay in the know. And the question for this episode is, how do you know when you're rippling impact out? How do you know when you're changing the community, the people around you for the better? I want to know. Send me an email. Find me on socials. Drop me a line. DM me. How do you know when you're rippling that impact out, when you're tapping into that soul-aligned place and creating from there? So thank you for joining, and I will see you all on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Reclaiming Our Spirit. To find out how I can help you reclaim your spirit, reach out to me at www.jessicapashke.com. Leave me a message and I just may share how you reclaimed your spirit in the next episode.